Marlene Warren died after being shot in the face by a clown.
Killer clowns are something you see in horror movies, not in real life.
Not one thing was clear. It was all a mystery.
It was such a bizarre case that did grab everyone's attention, locally, nationally, internationally.
When someone gets murdered, you immediately look to a spouse.
Police still haven't found that piece of the puzzle.
This case grew colder by the day.
And just like that, they hit a wall.
They're never going to find out who did this.
In 2014, new DNA technology came back with a hit.
This was the news that people had been waiting for years.
This is still all about Marlene Warren. We want to do justice for her.
I saw the eyes, and the eyes don't lie. As far back as I can remember, my brother John, my real father, and my real mother, Marlene, we lived in Michigan. I was about 3, 4 years old. My father went to war. He came back and he just wasn't right. He couldn't get his life back to normal. He was drinking, doing all kinds of things that you're not supposed to do around kids. So my mom, Marlene, decided to leave my father and move to Florida. It had to be tough on her. She was making this big decision to be a single parent with 2 young boys. She wanted us to grow up proper, and she was dedicated to us. She was a beautiful woman. She was inside and out. I can't say enough about her. She was always loving and caring. She was inspiring. Months passed, and she met Mike Warren, and he seemed like a nice guy. He was charming, he was flattering, he said the right things at the right time. He'd go out his way to do something, for someone. He seemed real nice, he seemed real knowledgeable, just a nice guy. So they got married. My mom was content. We were striving as a family. Things were going pretty good. Life was good.
Marlene was a great mom who took pride in everything that she did, and I think that was exemplified by the life that she lived. She was successful. Marlene owned properties. She was essentially a landlord. And her husband, Mike, repossessed cars. They were a busy family. From the outside, it looked like success.
Mike bought a piece of property out in the Aero Club in Wellington because he was flying airplanes.
The people who lived there parked their airplanes in the backyard. We're talking about wealthy people. You'd be lucky to live here. The American dream.
Wellington has this name for excellence, perfection, and it held its name for being a nice area to grow up in. It was something out of a fairy tale book. Everything was just immaculate. I can remember that day. It was around lunchtime. I was at work. My boss told me to go home. As soon as my mother saw me, she started crying and said, "Your brother's dead. He died in a car accident." I don't know how to tell you. I'm just going to tell you. And, you know, I lost all energy in my body. I just went limp. You know, I just was in disbelief. We were just devastated. After my brother's death, my mom, she started reaching out, needing Mike more, and asking for him to be around. And he was not around when he was asked to be around. She asked him to hire someone and to do what he needs to do to be home. And 6 months later, it didn't happen. Nothing changed. He wasn't home. The same old stuff, just different day. Eventually, she started catching on that something was wrong. He'd come up with excuses. I have to go do this, I have to do that, I have to repo cars. He had an excuse for everything as well. Excuse, not an answer. I remember that morning, my door opened up and I saw Mike's face look in. Nothing was said. He shut the door and left. You know, I had some friends over my house, and somewhere around 10 o'clock or so, we were eating our breakfast. And my friend Gene says, "Somebody's at the front door." We all look, and we can see the colors through the door. It looked like a person that had some flowers. Gene was going to go answer the door. My mom said, "No, sit down. Finish your breakfast. I'll go get the door." My mom went and answered the door. And we heard, "Oh, how pretty." And then I saw my mom fall to the ground. I looked down and saw that something was desperately wrong. I jumped up. I went to the front door. I looked out. And then I saw the clown. I was shocked. There was makeup on and there was colorful costume. I knew I needed to identify this person somehow. But it was impossible. I mean, the only thing I saw visible was the eyes. I saw big brown eyes. I couldn't say if it was a male or female. What really stuck out to me was the boots and the orange wig. I mean, I was trying to see whatever I could possibly see.
Joey Aarons and his girlfriend made their way to a car to be able to try to chase the clown.
The perpetrator drove off in a white LeBaron. I was so reckless, I could have killed us and someone else trying to get this car down. I never driven like that before in my life. Just running red lights, just whatever I had to do to try to catch up to this car. I drove all through Wellington. I finally got to the point that we're not going to get this car. It's gone.
I was the copy editor at the Palm Beach Post when the call came through that there was a shooting at a house in Wellington, and everyone rushed to the house. In the meantime, there were a couple neighbors who had heard gunshots. One was a doctor, and he and his neighbor rushed over and started treating Marlene.
I went back home and my mom was already in the ambulance. They told me they had her secured. She was okay. Detectives were there, roaming through the house, a cop in every corner in every room.
Police took photographs of everything. The blood stain in the entryway, the flowers that were still left behind, the balloons that were still left behind. Kind of right next to this pool of blood, very eerie, very sinister.
They individually interviewed the kids in the house, and each of their descriptions varied slightly. Most of them described that it was a white-faced clown with a red nose, so you had limited bits and pieces.
Usually you have a description of a male, female, but here was a clown who had dark eyes, and that's about it.
It's just so frustrating to not be able to give them any answers to go on. Looking back at it, not one thing was clear. It was all a mystery.
Breaking news, someone dressed as a clown shot a Wellington mother as she simply answered her front door.
When this happened, it shocked the entire community. And the search was on for this mysterious evil clown.
It was such a bizarre case that did grab everyone's attention, locally, nationally, internationally.
That shooter, a clown carrying flowers and balloons.
Marlene Warren had just answered her door, greeted by a clown.
And the whole specter of this person being dressed like a clown added this media frenzy about it.
Someone dressed as a clown came to the door with 2 balloons and a basket of flowers.
Clowns became very scary for people. There is something creepy about clowns. It was frightening.
Florida's known for kind of crazy crimes. And even by Florida standards, this one just blows it out of the water. Killer clowns are something you see on TV and in horror movies, not in real life.
She was on a respirator, a breathing machine. I stayed with her and I didn't get any response. No movement, no eye movement, nothing. I just prayed and told her not to leave me. I needed her.
In the emergency room, Marlene Warren struggled to stay alive. The bullet had entered her mouth and traveled back to the spine, and it actually damaged her spinal cord and her ability to breathe on her own.
The first day was still a lot of hope. The second day there was a lot of hope, but it started fading. On the third day, my grandmother said that, we're going to have to let her go. That was pretty hard. That was really hard. I could feel it in my heart and my soul just get ripped out of me. When I looked down at her and I knew my whole heart and my soul it left me.
Marlene suffered a gunshot wound to the head, and when she passed, the investigation changed from an attempted murder investigation to murder.
Marlene Warren died after being shot in the face by a clown who came to her door bearing flowers and balloons.
The detectives did ask Michael Warren if he had any ideas about who would have done this, what motive they might have had.
Michael, who apparently was rattled, told police that the person who committed this could have been perhaps a disgruntled tenant because Marlene was a landlord.
When the detectives spoke to all the people that knew Marlene Warren, to a man, to a person, everyone said nothing but the most glowing things about her.
We met tenants in the apartments that she managed who described her as more than a landlord, but a member of their families.
They couldn't find anybody that didn't like her or had any disagreement with her. So it pretty quickly became apparent that the only person that really had a motive was Michael Warren.
I think that people who were close to Marlene believed that Michael was having an affair, cheating on Marlene with one of his employees. The potential for a divorce would have been a devastating one financially for Michael. If Marlene had decided to leave that marriage because of what he was doing, she would have gotten the money. She would have gotten the properties because they were in her name.
You're listening to Mike Miller on...
We're talking about the death of Marlene Warren, the 26th of 1990. Somebody shot her wearing a clown outfit and left the home. Michael Warren with us. Mr. Warren, do you know anything about the shooting of your wife?
I do not know any more than what my son has told me at the time that he was at the house.
Do you suspect anyone in particular as being the person dressed in the clown that day who came to the house and killed your wife?
No, I really don't. It's been a tragic thing, and it's been like living in hell.
The investigators of this case had made no secret whatsoever, and if not formal allegations, certainly insinuations that Michael Warren was involved in the murder of his wife.
Well, I believe that if the sheriff's department can make accusations and comments without any proof or anything to back it up and bring me to trial by the media, I feel like I should say something that at least fight back.
Even though the motive for the killing seemed to be coming into view, there was nothing to tie Michael Warren directly to it. In law enforcement, when someone gets murdered, you immediately look to a spouse. But here you had Michael, who wasn't anywhere near the house at the time of the shooting. In fact, he was in a car with his friends on the way to a horse track. So he had an airtight alibi.
Soon after Marlene was shot, the police received a tip.
I'm afraid to say this. I think you just need to Sheila Keene, if you question.
A caller who said check on Sheila Keene. Sheila Keene was a girl from the Glades. A lot of people knew her. She was a girl with long brown hair, these deep chocolate eyes. She worked with Michael repossessing cars. They were close, they did business together, and as time went on, their coworkers said that they were very affectionate with one another.
It became pretty apparent very quickly that Sheila Keene was very much involved with Michael Warren, and it was more than business.
Even by Florida standards, this case is bizarre. You have essentially the execution of a mother, not someone with mafia ties, not a woman with enemies, killed by a clown.
Although it was obvious to everyone that Michael was cheating on Marlene behind her back with Sheila Keene, there was no evidence that Michael participated in the murder. So police were focused now on Sheila Keene. They had the flowers and the balloons, and they went back and searched every local flower store to find out who sold these flowers and who sold the balloon.
Pretty quickly, detectives were able to locate a nearby Publix that in fact sold that very style of an arrangement.
When police went to the Publix, the employees who sold those balloons said that they remembered a tall woman with long brown hair buying them.
They next then were able to locate a nearby costume shop that was called Capizio. So they were able to speak to a couple of the ladies that worked at Spotlight Capizio who reported that on Thursday night, the 24th of May, that a female had come to the door after they were closed and was insistently knocking on the door to get them to open up.
They let her in. They described this woman as having long brown hair, brown eyes, kind of a mannish sort of mannerisms.
This was 2 days before the murder, and while inside, this woman asked for a clown costume and extra white makeup, but was not interested in buying shoes.
The clown who showed up at Marlene's door and pulled the trigger wasn't wearing clown shoes either. Joe and his friends said that the clown was wearing combat boots.
So detectives recognized immediately that Sheila Keene matched the description both of the ladies at the Publix and the ladies at Spotlight Capizio.
Police tell the employees to look through a police lineup for the person they sold that costume to, and Sheila's photo is in there. Neither is 100% sure that that's the woman who bought the costume.
Within about a week or two of the shooting, a white Chrysler LeBaron was reported to be abandoned in a nearby shopping center. So deputies responded, and when they find this white Chrysler LeBaron, which has the VIN number of a car, that had been reported stolen.
Not only was it stolen, it was stolen by Michael Warren's car lot.
Michael owned a company called A Bargain Motors, and their advertisements looked like a competitor car rental company called Payless. The clown drove away in a white Chrysler LeBaron. It was one that a couple had dropped off at A Bargain Motors, mistakenly believing that they were at Payless. Instead of correcting the problem and returning the car to Payless, Michael and his employees kept it.
They processed the car. There was a Publix plastic bag in the car and some fibers.
There are these reddish-orange fibers, consistent with what you might find in a clown wig. They also find long brown hair. Technology was not what it is today, and they weren't able to forensically analyze it.
The car itself didn't really lend evidentiary value except for the connection to Bargain Motors and Michael Warren.
Sheila Keene wasn't repo agent for Michael Warren. She was at the car lot a whole lot.
They brought Sheila Keene in for interviewing and asked her, where were you on May 26th?
You remember that far back Saturday morning where you were or what you were doing?
I got dressed, to Waymont.
What time was it when you left your house?
I don't know, I'd say somewhere, 10, 10:30, 11 o'clock, something like that.
Did you find that car?
No,
Did you talk to anybody down there?
No.
Just drove by?
Yeah.
What kind of car were you looking for in point?
Oh, God. I don't know, I think it was a Datsun, Nissan, Toyota, something like that. I don't know.
You know the location, what street in Boynton?
I think it's north something, 13th and 14th, I don't know.
She told police that at the time of the shooting, she was out repossessing cars, but she couldn't really give any kind of definitive address.
She was unable to provide them with a single person that she spoke to.
You couldn't have been driven by this passion because of this relationship that you and Michael. Something.
There is no relationship, there is no passion.
She adamantly denied being in a romantic relationship with Michael Warren.
What would happen if that was your car?
I don't know how it got there, because I wasn't in the car.
She claimed that her hair in the car could have come from anybody.
We're getting nowhere, because I'm telling you, I didn't do it. So whoever wants you to think that I done it, you need to find out who that person is.
She denied killing Marlene, and police didn't have anything that could prove otherwise at that time.
Law enforcement searched Sheila's home and found multiple pairs of combat boots. Did not find a clown costume there, but did find a lot of white makeup, the kind that you use for a clown costume. But she denied everything.
You have these clown wig fibers in this stolen car. You have long brown hair in the back of the car. You have a description of a woman with long brown hair going to buy a clown costume the day before the murder. You have a woman with long brown hair buying balloons and flowers that end up being found next to Marlene's body. You have all of these pieces starting to link together, but we don't have enough evidence to arrest. And just like that, they hit a wall. They couldn't move forward. They couldn't conclusively link Sheila to the murder.
I remember after they questioned her, she left town. She was gone, And I'm going, oh my goodness.
Sheila Keene thought she got away with it. But although the case went cold, didn't mean it was over. This is still all about Marlene Warren. We want to do justice for her.
So as the homicide investigation continued, Michael Warren and Sheila Keene, as individuals, became in the background. Nobody really knew where they were or cared where they were or followed up on them.
The case started to go cold. You had a circumstantial case without a lot of direct evidence. There wasn't enough for prosecutors and police to decide to make a charge. And so this case grew colder by the day.
I had to say to myself, They're never going to find out who did this. My thought of the whole thing was, I gotta let this go. It's killing me. It's ruining my life.
One of the reporters at the Palm Beach Post was revisiting the case. One of our brilliant researchers went, "Oh, they're married."
Michael Warren and Sheila Keene had gotten married, and that started a whole new interest of AHA.
They moved to Virginia. Sheila changes her name to Debbie, dyed her hair blonde. They open a fast food restaurant. Have a happy life for years. They would invite their neighbors over for dinner and have dinner parties, and they were likable. They were a couple who seemed good and normal. Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office got a grant to re-examine old cases, and they chose this clown murder case. I think the reason they did might have been because of its allure and just how sensational it was.
Marlene Warren died after being shot in the face by a clown.
That shooter, a clown carrying flowers and balloons.
Marlene Warren had just entered her door, greeted by a clown.
It was a huge murder. It was a shocking murder. I don't think it ever went out of the minds of law enforcement. And then I think the learning that they were married compelled them even more.
I found out that they opened up the case again. I mean, I was crying, but happy tears. I've never had that feeling before. You know, it was really wild.
A new detective took over the case, and she started to go through these decades-old bags of evidence, and she found among them a 6 to 8 inch fiber attached to one of the balloons left at the scene of Marlene's murder. And she got it analyzed. And that fiber matched the fiber found in the getaway car, and it also matched fiber found in Sheila's house. So here's the first definite connection, putting Sheila at the scene.
Back in 1990, they didn't have DNA technology like we have today. In 2014, new DNA technology came back with a hit from the strand of hair that was in the car that showed that the DNA in the car matched a mixture of Sheila Keene Warren and another person.
It was a wow moment. Finally, police had a scientific connection between the hair and Sheila Keene.
There was a meeting with the state attorney's office, and the decision was made to make the arrest of Sheila Keene for the murder of Marlene Warren.
We were determined to do justice. We wanted her to be held accountable for her evil actions. She was the evil clown, and her day was coming.
Breaking news, new documents shed light on a clown killer mystery and how investigators tracked down the suspect hundreds of miles away.
This was the news that people had been waiting for years, and the announcement of her arrest just reignited that sensation and this whole entire story.
They were watching them up at their home in Virginia, and they wanted to make the arrest away from the house.
So we worked with law enforcement to set up a checkpoint. And when she was driving, they pulled her over. And told her she was under arrest.
Sheila Keene didn't say, "What am I getting arrested for?"
She only had one question for law enforcement: if her husband was going to be arrested too. Once Sheila Keene Warren was arrested, she was brought back to Palm Beach County to face justice.
After 27 years, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office says it has cracked the Wellington killer clown cold case. Last night in Virginia, detectives arrested Sheila Keene Warren, who was the victim's husband's mistress.
I saw a bunch of pictures of her. That picture were the same eyes as the day that she killed my mother. Those eyes, when she got arrested, were all beady and looking exactly like that day. You know, I saw the eyes, and the eyes don't lie.
See if you'd answer some questions that really weren't ever answered back then.
I didn't do it, so that's the end of the story. I'm not talking to you.
You don't want to talk, you don't want to give your side of the story as to what happened.
Of course, in Sheila's interview, she continued to deny everything about the homicide of Marlene Warren and any involvement at all in her death.
Okay. You're charged with the first-degree murder, okay, of Marlene Warren.
So it's a huge deal. Sheila is facing the death penalty.
Okay. We're gonna go up to the regional jail and process you, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Even with all of this excitement and the momentum of her arrest, things slow way down very quickly. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office evidence room was audited, and auditors found that bags of evidence, including those taken from the crime scene in the clown murder, were left open, just wide open.
We were looking at a box full of evidence that wasn't in really good shape. I'm thinking, oh God, if I was the other lawyer, I'd eat this case apart. You know, so many things were going through my head, you know, that she could just walk.
And then in the midst of that, the COVID pandemic hit, and our courthouse basically shut down for over 2 years. And during that time, we lost a key witness who passed.
Each day that passes, evidence is getting weaker. You've got fewer and fewer witnesses. Sheila had a robust team of defense attorneys who did everything they could to poke holes in the prosecutor's case.
The discussion started coming together about what's our realistic expectation of what we can get out of this crime at this time.
Prosecutors decided not to pursue the death penalty. She could be sentenced to life in prison, but not executed. It got so close to trial that Dave Ehrenberg, the state attorney, was on TV saying, this trial is coming in 2 weeks, and we are so confident that she's going to be convicted.
I had to get to the point and tell myself, no matter how this ends, I have to be good with it. If she walks and doesn't get anything, I got to be good with it.
Finally, the trial is just around the corner, and we get a tip that Sheila is about to plead guilty in less than an hour.
The old school. Yeah, this is a 1990.
No one expected it. I go to the courthouse because we've gotten this tip.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, Ms. Keene Warren witness plea of guilty as outlined in the plea agreement.
The state offered her a pretty remarkable plea deal. She pleads guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for a 12-year prison sentence, which was just a huge shock.
I would never have entered into this plea agreement unless Joey approved it. The victim is really important to us, and Joe said that he was ready to move on and have some measure of closure.
I couldn't deny it. I wanted a conviction. And so did they. If she was going to do 12 years, let's do the 12 years. She'll pay. One way or another, she'll get what's coming to her.
The whole time Sheila Keene Warren was behind bars, she never let on that she was the clown killer. Michael Warren was in the car with a perfect alibi while this occurred. There was no evidence that Michael participated in the murder of his wife. So we do not have enough to charge him. And if that changes, we'll be ready.
Everybody loved my mom. Nobody disliked her. She was always honest, caring, discerning to everyone that wanted to help themselves. She was very alive, you know. She would always laugh and she would see the good in everything. She taught me how to do that, and that was a blessing.
Orange County, November 1999. A security guard discovers a parked car on the Ortega Highway.
He was going to check on a gate when he came across the car that was still running.
Inside are the bodies of Ken and Carolyn Stahl, two medical doctors from nearby Huntington Beach.
They were shot multiple times. They never had a chance.
It was just really a mystery about what had happened.
It was alarming to the citizens of Orange County. There was a lot of speculation as to what may have occurred.
Police are baffled by the senseless killings, but their investigation soon uncovers a bizarre and deadly love triangle.
I've never had another case like it. She got to the point where she set this thing in motion and ultimately followed through with the plan.
Lying in wait, preparation, full intent to kill. That is the definition of murder.
This is the story of the cold-blooded murder of Ken and Carolyn Stahl, a jealous lover and a killer for hire. Orange County in Southern California covers the area from Los Angeles down to San Diego.
Orange County is a big county. It's one of the largest counties in California, and it's a diverse county. It's got beautiful beaches. There's a lot of wealth.
Most of the houses, the rich people, were mostly down by the coast, which is Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, San Juan Capistrano. Then you go north and you go up into Huntington Beach, and then you go into LA County.
For a long time, it was agricultural, so it was kind of catching up. We did have murders and we did have violent crimes, but not to the extent that a lot of the other surrounding areas did.
On Friday, the 20th of November, 1999, a security guard traveling along the Ortega Highway notices a parked car with the engine still running and the lights on.
The area was about 8 miles east of San Juan, and the car was parked in an emergency turnout right next to an emergency call box that people use to call when they have car trouble.
The security guard pulls up to the car, silver sedan. The car is running, the headlights are on, but there's some broken glass on the ground on the driver's side. And the security guard now is suspicious and wants to know what's going on. So he walks up to this car. It's very dark, only illuminated by his headlights. and his flashlight.
The passenger door was open. He could see the legs of a woman sticking out of the passenger side. And as he approached the driver's side, he saw a man with blood all over his head, slumped forward with his head on the steering wheel.
The security guard calls 911 from the nearby call box, and first responders soon arrive on the scene to assess the situation.
At that particular time, what they do is they end up contacting CHP, California Highway Patrol, because we need to secure the area. So they cordon it off. They shut the Ortega Highway off because now we have a crime scene.
They are trained to take a look at these scenes, to first of all check for signs of life, while not disturbing what appears to be a crime scene where there's going to have to be full-scale investigation.
I got a call from my unit sergeant at home. It was in the middle of the night. I got up and went directly to the crime scene in my personal car and met my partner there. It was probably 1 o'clock in the morning when I got there.
Investigators carefully examine the crime scene for evidence as they try to piece together the tragic sequence of events leading up to the shooting.
They're trying to reconstruct what happened. They are looking for evidence, they're looking for clues, signs of injuries on the body, other things that can tell them what transpired.
This was a rather wealthy, aristocratic couple. They found driver's license for both of them, and they were immediately able to identify who they were.
They both had California driver's licenses. His was in a wallet in his pocket. Hers was in a wallet in her purse.
The occupants of the car are identified as 57-year-old Kenneth Stahl and his wife, 44-year-old Carolyn.
Ken Stahl was sitting in the driver's seat. He was still wearing his seatbelt. Didn't look like he'd ever attempted to get out of the car. He had been shot once on the bridge of the nose, and then he was shot again in the torso and the chest.
We recovered 6 bullets from the scene and from their bodies. And then with our forensic scientist was able to match those as 357 or 38.
There was one found on the driver's side, one was found in her jacket, and then one was found on the passenger side. They noticed that on his elbow, his triceps, and in his eye, there were bullet wounds. They believe the one from the eye came from the back of the head and came out his eye.
On the other side of the car, Carolyn Stahl was laying across the passenger seat with her head near the console and her feet toward the door, face down.
She seemed to be shot about 10 times all over her body. It was torso, her arm, her leg.
The passenger door was open. The back of the car had blood smears on it that were probably from her, we figured, and her shoe was laying on the side of the roadway near the rear of the car.
They find the blood drops behind the car, and she at some point during all of this shooting got out of the car, dripped blood, lost her shoe, and then got back in the car.
It was a very unusual situation. 2 bodies on this remote road, no signs of robbery.
They had money, her jewelry was there. The only thing that was missing was a stone from one of her rings. So we didn't think it was a robbery because nothing appeared to have been taken.
Police canvass the nearby area and appeal for witnesses to come forward to assist them in their investigation.
There's an overnight campground there at Casper's Park. So that evening, we sent a couple of detectives over to the campground, and they actually woke everybody up that was spending the night in the campground and interviewed everyone in the campground. No one there had seen or heard anything.
There was a woman that had called and said she was traveling the opposite way on the Ortega Highway and said she saw a small white 4-door vehicle traveling the opposite way. And she thought it was kind of strange, but she reported it. So we had that, but she didn't have any license plate or anything like that. How many white 4-door little cars are in Orange County?
The other witness that we had was a security officer from the Mission Viejo company. He didn't see anything other than the car parked on the side of the road, so he didn't have much to add at that point.
The post-mortem examinations of Ken and Carolyn were to later reveal even more horrific details of their final moments.
After a person is murdered, the body becomes essentially evidence. The body speaks. to the investigators. What these bodies tell investigators is that they were executed.
Based on the autopsy, our time of death for them was between 8:30 and 10:30. We identified the weapon as a .357 or .38 caliber revolver. They're usually 6-shot revolvers, not 8. So we believe that the shooter reloaded, then walked up behind Carolyn and just shot her in the back of the head twice.
They were shot by a very powerful handgun with a kind of bullets designed to inflict the maximum amount of damage.
They were both shot multiple times, and the cause of death was the sanguination due to gunshot wounds.
Ken died from a gunshot that pierced his aorta, and Carolyn died from gunshot wounds to her head. Whoever did the shooting approached on the driver's side. The window was down, shot Ken first, and then attempted to shoot at Carolyn. Carolyn exited. The shooter came back around and confronted Carolyn. We believe that he either hit her or pushed her to the ground. She had like gravel scrapings on her knee, and there was blood smear along the right rear quarter panel, and her shoe had fallen off.
Why did the Stalls pull to the side of the road? Didn't even turn off the car. Why did the driver's side window go down? Who is this person or persons who came up and started shooting? And why did he kill them?
November 1999. 57-year-old Kenneth Stahl and his wife 44-year-old Carolyn Obby Stahl are found dead in their car on a remote part of the Ortega Highway. Investigators have gathered crucial evidence from the crime scene and the autopsies, but they still have no definite leads in the case.
They said, well, it could have been a murder-suicide, but as you look at the horrendous injuries here, not likely. It could have been a random assault by just somebody passing by. People don't just randomly kill without taking something as a possession. And third, it could have been a hit where there was an arranged murder.
It just didn't make sense. This is not the kind of place you would do a robbery. It's not the kind of place you would do a carjacking. And how would you pull them over? What were the couple doing out in the middle of the Ortega Highway in the middle of the night anyway from Huntington Beach?
Ken Stahl was a 57-year-old anesthesiologist who had his practice in Huntington Beach.
Carolyn was an ophthalmologist, both very successful. The perception was they had an ideal marriage.
Investigators look closely at Ken and Carolyn and their lives together in the affluent coastal community of Huntington Beach.
Carolyn worked at an office in Orange County. Everybody that knew her thought the world of her. She didn't have any enemies that we could find. Everybody liked her.
Kenneth Stahl comes from a very prominent medical family. His father was a pretty well-known surgeon in Southern California and founded his own hospital.
He always compared himself to his father. He wanted to be as good as his father.
Ken had suffered from ongoing health problems prior to his death.
Heart disease ran in the family for Ken. His father actually passed away at an early age.
Not only did Ken's father die young of a heart attack, but his grandfather as well. And Ken had had a couple of heart issues and had bypass surgery.
He exercised incessantly. People would say he was a health freak, that he wanted to live and be free of the heart disease which plagued him.
Ken and Carolyn's marriage is of particular interest to investigators.
They are talking to friends, family of the Stalls, and they get a slightly different picture of this couple than people thought.
Carolyn's sister came forward to speak to the original investigators and told a whole story of everything about their relationship.
Right after Ken's first bypass, he meets Carolyn. They apparently hit it off right away. They don't date very long, and they get married in Las Vegas on New Year's Eve, 1988.
He had already been married, she was already married, and they thought that this could be the one.
A lot of people said that Carolyn was a gold digger because she saw a very wealthy man and went after him. But it was Ken's mother who was so enamored with Caroline. She thought she was good for him.
Ken ended up marrying Carolyn for his mom. His mom fell in love with Carolyn and thought that she would be the perfect wife for him.
As time went on after they got married, no, she's not good for me. And he was very unhappy. He said he was Dr. Nobody because he didn't have the kind of life that he wanted.
Carolyn really tried to hide the fact that her marriage was not really a marriage, that Ken had a wandering eye.
Ken was a serial philanderer, and even when he married Carolyn, he still continued to have one girlfriend after another.
One time she went back east, and when she came back from her trip, she finds an unknown female sitting in her living room eating food. She confronts the girl, and the girl leaves. She confronts Ken. He says, "Hey, you knew the way I was and you married me."
They had financial problems. That beautiful house they used to live in, $700,000 house, Ken had to sell, and they downsized to a condo. Nice condo, but it ain't a mansion.
For Christmas, she would go out and buy her all sorts of gifts for herself. Earrings, perfume, dresses, and she would wrap them up and she'd put them under the Christmas tree, and she'd tell her friends, "Look what Ken got me, look what Ken got me." But the family knew it was not the truth.
The couple did not have the marriage that people thought that they had. Neither one of them really wanted a divorce, but for different reasons.
The stories about doctors who go through divorces, particularly in Orange County, are legend. To the point where the doctors who practice there say, I ain't going through no divorce.
Carolyn had already been divorced. Her first husband cheated on her as well. She didn't want to give up on the idea of having that perfect Orange County marriage.
The couple had vicious, loud fights, and people saw bruises on Carolyn. And while they had no proof, they seriously wondered whether she was abused by Ken.
Investigators are now aware that the relationship between Ken and Carolyn Stahl was fractious, and it is at this point that they receive new information from Ken's sister.
There is usually an estate or some kind of winding up and looking at the finances of the deceased. Ken's sister started going through his banking records.
She said, "I found all his money. There's $30,000 missing from his account, and I can't account for it."
I had his bank accounts and I had his actual checkbook with a ledger in it. Just cash withdrawals. They didn't have a destination for him.
The $30,000 was a key. Why is he missing $30,000 from his account?
Ken's pager is recovered from the car and examined by technical experts.
People that don't know what pagers are, they're just a little square thing that you had on your hip that you punch in a phone number and it would send a message, 000XOXOXO. That was a major form of communication that people used to get messages back then.
The tech team discover one phone number in particular that appears multiple times on Ken's pager on the day of the murders.
Original investigators pulled his phone records or his pager records, and we found half a dozen to 10 pages consistently calling, like somebody wanted to get a hold of him very, very bad. 911, 911, 911, 911.
The phone number belongs to 33-year-old Adriana Vasco. Police track her down and bring her in for questioning.
She said that she was a receptionist that worked for him at his pain clinic and that she was calling him because he had offered to have a computer repaired for her because they had this platonic working relationship. And she described him as kind of a mentor at that time.
Adriana's interview raises the suspicions of the police, but she continues to deny any involvement in the murders and is released without charge.
We knew that she wasn't being honest with us, And we were sure that she knew more about what had happened than what she was telling us. We really didn't key on anything she said at that point because we didn't have enough information to know the veracity of her statements were.
Investigators suspect there may have been more to Adriana's working relationship with Kenneth Stahl.
Detective McDonald never really believed the whole "I paged Ken to fix my computer" story. The more the detective knows about Ken's philandering, the more he suspects, that Adriana was probably one of his women.
We found out that she wasn't merely a receptionist. The business wasn't what she presented, and people were telling us that they had a romantic relationship in addition to just being an employee. So we went back and we talked to her again. She admitted that she had more of a relationship with him, but it wasn't what it seemed like.
She admitted to having a brief affair with him. He was a doctor, giving her gifts and showing her all sorts of attention, and she felt smitten with him, and they went out and they had an affair.
The community of Orange County are outraged by the violent murders, and the Sheriff's Department is under pressure to quickly solve the case.
They were kind of at a dead end, that there were a few things that they were looking at related to his business. Maybe it was an insurance thing. They really didn't have anything concrete in those first 9 months.
The case is reassigned to a new team who re-examine the notes and evidence previously collected.
My sergeant came up to me and he goes, "I got something for you." And he grabbed a 3-inch binder and he said, "This is Stahl murders. Let's see what you can do with this," and handed it to me.
I went through the case with him, explaining what we'd done and where we were going and what our thoughts were at the time. I also told him that we were looking for Adriana for that 4th interview, and I suggest that they start with her and try and get that 4th interview and find out what she would give up to them.
They had a sense that Adriana just wasn't pushed enough. They were convinced she knew things, and that if they just figured out a way to pressure that information out of her, maybe the case could be revived.
At that time, we didn't know exactly what her involvement is. All we know is that she is the key. She knows more than what she's telling investigators.
Orange County, California. The investigation into the murders of 57-year-old Kenneth Stahl and his wife Carolyn has been reassigned to a new team of detectives. The married couple had been shot dead in their car on the Ortega Highway 9 months earlier in November 1999.
We went through many scenarios when we started looking at the case. We thought about snipers, we thought about road rage. We even thought maybe there was like a serial killer that was impersonating a police officer, or it could have been like a gang initiation. There were so many scenarios that went through our head.
Detectives have identified one particular person of interest that they want to speak to, 33-year-old Adriana Vasco.
We felt the key is Adriana. She had to have known more. Listening to the audio recordings of the original interviews, just something didn't seem right.
Adriana's phone number appeared multiple times on Kenneth's pager the day he and Carolyn were murdered.
I knew where she was living. I was knocking on her door. She just wouldn't return my calls for like about 2 weeks. So finally, one day, we just drove up on her when she got off of work. She was working at a medical center in Costa Mesa. She was walking out to her car. We walked up. We identified ourselves. I go, "Do you remember me? I was calling you all those times." And she goes, "Oh, yeah." So we invited her. "Hey, could you come talk to us?"
Adriana agrees to be interviewed at the Orange County Sheriff's Office in Stanton.
It was just a brief conversation. It was maybe like 45 minutes. She kind of reiterated the exact same story that she told the original investigators. She had a baby, a young child, a little girl, and the father of that child was Greg Stewart. She was living with the Stewarts in Westminster. Greg's their son. Our curiosity was very high on who is this individual, because that was certainly another possible suspect. He was a military background, comfortable with weapons. He certainly could shoot somebody. We pulled Greg aside. "Hey, Greg, if you were us, who would you be looking at?" And that's when Greg said, "I looked at your new boyfriend, Tony." We're like, "Tony? Who's Tony?" He was a maintenance man that worked at her apartment complex in Anaheim. got back to our office and we started working up some stuff, and we pulled up phone records from the Stewart's house. The day after we had spoken to her the first time, she was making about a dozen calls to Greenville, North Carolina. We didn't know what that connection was.
Why is this woman calling North Carolina from Orange County, California? Police now have enough evidence to get a search warrant to search through a storage facility that Adriana uses. And in the storage facility, they find a very interesting piece of paper, an application to work at the Avanti apartment complexes, like a handyman manager.
We sent another team of investigators to go try to identify who he is. They end up finding ID from the manager, his cooperative, says here's his employment records, here's his driver's license. His name is Tony Satin.
The race is now on to find Tony Satin.
We look every which way, and we can't find any record of any Tony Satin with that date of birth existing anywhere.
Police have a picture of Tony Satin. They send it to the sheriff of Pitt County, North Carolina. Sheriff looks at the picture and says, yeah, I know him. We call him the Weasel.
He actually went by the nickname the Weasel because he had a weasel tattooed on his torso. He did all different kinds of crime, but he had never done murder, so they were very shocked to see what crime he was now being suspected of.
They identify him as Dennis Earl Godley. He's a notorious criminal for that area, drug dealer, gang member. He's a bad guy, real bad guy.
They were amazed at the criminal background that this Dennis guy, who they knew as Tony, had.
It's at this point that North Carolina detectives are able to provide a break in the case for their fellow investigators in Orange County.
They say, hey, guess what? We know exactly where he is. He's in jail in Virginia on a robbery case. We fly out to the East Coast and we go to the jail where he's at and we conduct an interview with him. I've been involved in a lot of interviews, and this is the first one that lasted like a little over 6 hours. It was a chess match. He wanted to know how much we had, and then we needed to know how much he had. Eventually, he admitted to being on the West Coast, that he was in Anaheim, and he worked as maintenance man at the apartment complex where Adriana lived. So there's a connection. And that was about it. That was about all we had.
At the end of the interview, Dennis Earl Godley makes a comment that captures the attention of the detectives.
Once we went off tape, Godley said something interesting. He goes, I'm not gonna say I did it, but if I did do it, could I do federal time and not be put to death? Why would an innocent man say that? We knew that we had our guy.
The team returns to Orange County. They need to find out what Adriana knows about the murders, and they have a plan.
We did search warrants in North Carolina because we knew that his father lived there. We collected computers, we collected everything we could of evidentiary value, but then we had all these warrants we had to do in California as well. We needed to go to the storage units. We needed to go to the Stalls condominium, Huntington Beach. We needed to find out more and more about Adriana.
The cops intercept Adriana in a parking lot after she's at work. They say, come on into the station. We want to talk to you one more time. This time they give her a lie detector test.
We put straps around the chest to measure the respirations. We measure the perspiration on the skin. We measure the temperature of the skin and the heart rate, and whether or not the voice becomes stressed when asked a question.
She failed the lie detector test. There's 3 questions that she failed on. Do you have any idea who killed Ken and Caroline? Were you involved in the murders of Ken and Caroline? And do you know who killed Ken and Caroline? We went in and talked to her again, and she once again denied. And then my partner dropped the bomb on her. He goes, okay, tell us who Tony is. And that's when she completely fell back in her chair. Her face went pale white. She crossed her arms and she just started crying, sobbing. And she immediately goes, I have to go to the bathroom. I have to go to the bathroom.
Detectives now believe they have enough grounds for suspicion to arrest Adriana.
This is enough to convince police that not only does she know something, but she's probably involved. Polygraph's not even admissible, it's just suspicious. They still don't have enough evidence to arrest her in the murder.
She had also outstanding traffic warrants. They exercised their right to arrest her and they put her into jail.
They're able to separate her from her child, try to get her to confess.
Godley now sends a chilling warning to Adriana from his prison cell in Virginia.
He'd made some vain threats against Adriana that I have people back there that'll take care of business. He's a bad person, and he does have contacts over here on the West Coast. We contacted the Stewarts, and we tell them that we've identified Tony Satin as Dennis Earl Godley. Please be careful.
Then investigators receive an unexpected call that they believe will break the case.
About 3 days later, I got a phone call, and it's a collect call from an inmate from LA County Jail. And I accept the call, and it's Adriana. She wants to talk. Got in our cars, drove up to Twin Towers, which is LA County, downtown LA. We sit down and interview her in a little jail cell, and that's when we got her side of the story.
She tells them that yes, she knows who Tony is. He had told her that he would do the murder for hire.
She puts all the blame on Ken and Godley, that they're the ones that were manipulating her. They're the ones that are driving everything. Ken was relentless at just hounding her and hounding her and hounding her to find somebody to kill his wife.
She told Ken all about Tony, and then Ken had gotten in touch with Tony and that he had agreed with Tony that there would be a hit on the wife for $30,000. It would take place on Ortega Highway where it was remote, and that Tony would drive out behind Ken and Carolyn, and when the car stopped, Tony would approach the car and he would kill Carolyn.
Ken did something that made Godley fearful or distrust Ken. And you got to remember Godley's background. He doesn't trust anybody. You know, he's the weasel. If you're between him and freedom, he'll take you out.
But will Adriana's testimony be enough to convict Dennis Earl Godley in court for the murders of Ken and Carolyn Stahl? Orange County, California. Police have arrested Adriana Vasco and her ex-boyfriend Dennis Earl Godley for the murders of Kenneth and Carolyn Stahl. The Stahls were gunned down as they sat in their parked car on a remote part of the Ortega Highway.
We filed charges on Dennis Earl Godley and Adriana Vasco. Both of them were charged for 2 counts of first-degree murder.
The police and the prosecutors felt they had enough to charge first-degree murder with special circumstances calling for the death penalty.
A preliminary hearing is held in March 2021, but investigators receive an unexpected setback in their case against Vasco and Godley.
It was a Judge Dickey out of Southwest Orange County Court. He threw out all of Adriana's testimonies, the original one in Stanton, the one in Costa Mesa, and the one in LA County Jail. He said it was coerced. That kind of left us in dire strait, actually.
You always want a video of the person doing it, or a confession, or an eyewitness, DNA, whatever, and they didn't have any of that. They had to build this outrageous story about a doctor and a girl from the other side of the tracks and her bad boy boyfriend and the ophthalmologist who got in the way. They had to construct a tale that is almost too outrageous to be true.
Police continue to build their case against Adriana Vasco and Dennis Earl Godley, despite the lack of hard evidence connecting them to the murders.
They had significant circumstantial evidence. They had the phone calls, the phone records, plus not everything that Adriana said was excluded by the judge. There was significant information that the police had gotten outside of the jailhouse interrogation.
There was a runaway girl that was living with Adriana at the time. We identified her and interviewed her, and she said that they came back after the shooting, that she saw some blood on Godley's boots. And they were kind of giddy, having fun, they were laughing. He was kind of like cocky, like I shot that, and flicked the shell casing at her and said, here's a souvenir to prove it.
More information comes to light about an earlier attempt by Ken to hire a hitman to kill his wife, Carolyn.
Ken did some really brazen things. He asked a few people. One was his electrician. He thought that he would do it because he was an ex-gang member.
He was an ex-gang member, he had a troubled youth, but he pulled himself out of it. He was an individual that turned his whole life around. He felt he wanted to tell the truth about something. So we went and interviewed him, and we found out that Ken had called him to do some work on his house, some type of electrical stuff.
Ken gets to talking. He says, were you in a gang, you know? And yeah, I was younger. I put that aside and I found religion. I just don't do that anymore. And Ken says, well, you sure you don't do it anymore, you know? You ever use a gun before? Yeah, I used a gun, you know. Would you use a gun for me? What are you talking about? He says, would you kill my wife?
He flat out said, will you kill my wife? And the electrician was like, no, get a divorce.
Then a new break in the case comes from an unlikely source.
When they were arrested, it was like, boom, this explosion went off with regard to this case. Because it had been dormant, we hadn't been paying attention to it, and then all of a sudden, it's back in the news. Who are these people? Who is Adriana Vasco? Who is Godley? And so it was a highly competitive media market at that time. Every TV station was chasing it. We were chasing it. All the search warrants in California had been sealed. To be able to search something, you have to lay out your case. But I got a tip that there was a search warrant served in North Carolina with regard to Godley. I made some phone calls and was able to get my hands on that search warrant, and it kind of laid out the Sheriff's Department's case.
Bill Rams did a great job with this. After this came out, he made an attempt to get a story. He wanted to talk to Dennis Earl Godley.
I wrote him a letter and said, hey, here's what they're saying about you. Call me anytime. I want to hear your side of the story. Godley called me, which was a shock. And so during my interview with him, he said that he didn't know who Stahl was, that Adriana was one of many women that he dated, and that he had nothing to do with it.
Bill Rams reaches out to Adriana, hoping she will tell him her side of the story.
If I could get this to Adriana, she might be interested in knowing what he's saying.
He showed up at the Orange County Jail one day during general visiting hours.
And so I wrote her a short note that said something to the effect of, hey, I talked to Dennis. If you want to know what he said, give me a call.
Adriana sees the note, and so she agrees to talk to him. And then everything changed at that point in time.
And so I told her what Dennis had told me, and then she started crying, and then she opened up a little bit about it's not true what Dennis was saying and that she didn't want to be involved in it.
She makes a stunning admission. Adriana admits that she was out there on Ortega Highway that night with her friend Tony Satin, aka Dennis Godley, and that Dennis committed the murders. That she didn't know what was going to happen. She couldn't stop it. That she was terrified.
The breaking news story comes as a shock to the police investigators.
My partner and I were carpooling at the time, and I pull up in front of his house, and he grabbed his Orange County Register paper, and he opens up, and he goes, oh my God. So we got into our office, and then we read the whole story, and it's exactly what she told us.
It does create a interesting First Amendment battle. Can they drag Bill Rams into court and force him to testify? Can they subpoena his notes? Is he protected by the journalist shield law?
In California, there's a thing called the shield law. And the shield law protects the newspaper from being forcibly disclosing confidential information which is given to that newspaper reporter. But there was enough which he had included in the article
I was subpoenaed because the prosecution was going to use the article as evidence against her at the trial.
Once she was kind of on the record admitting to things she had not admitted for years to anybody before, that's when the case turned.
Adriana Vasco's trial begins in November 2002.
She used a psychologist from UCLA, very prominent, very good, and testified that she was afraid of Dennis, that Dennis intimidated her, and she testified to all the threats that Dennis made, and that she was involuntarily involved in the relationship, and so her conduct was the product of a battered woman.
Once the judge allowed Bill Rams's testimony to stand, then she had to try to defend herself for this domestic violence controlling thing. But the jury saw right through it, just like we saw it right through the very first.
Since the murders of Kenneth and Carolyn Stahl, Adriana Vasco is found guilty by the Orange County Superior Court.
Adriana is convicted of first-degree murder in Carolyn's death, second-degree murder in Ken's, and she got life in prison without the possibility of parole.
She wanted what Carolyn had. She wanted to be Mrs. Kenneth Stahl. She wanted the rest of her life to be taken care of.
She wanted the fancy clothes, the nice car, to live in a nice house. She wanted everything that Carolyn had and everything that she stood for.
In May 2004, Dennis Earl Godley pleads guilty to 2 counts of first-degree murder in exchange for not receiving the death penalty. He is sentenced to life in prison without parole.
Everybody else in this group is kind of sort of normal. They're not criminals. They don't have violent pasts. So he's the odd man out as far as the criminal background and the criminal activity.
Godley's a psychopath. He's just a stone-cold killer. He died in prison of cancer.
The family and friends of Kenneth and Carolyn Stahl are left wondering how a crime like this could have happened.
Carolyn did not deserve this at all. She wanted a happy marriage. That's not what she ended up getting, but she fought for it. She did. She tried. You know, she knew about his numerous affairs and tried to work through it. She just wanted love.
The doctors don't want to go through these divorces, and certainly Ken Stahl did not want to go through the divorce and lose so much. He decided it would be so much better and so much cheaper just to do away with his wife.
Here's a doctor, educated, had everything for him, and he turns out to be involved in the murder of his wife, who just loved him unconditionally. And even though it was through his infidelities, though his selfishness, the times he would go hanging out in seedy areas, she still loved him. She still wanted him.
The community of Orange County is shocked by the murders of the Stahls.
In Orange County, they don't want their doctors in the middle of a messy love triangle, hiring hitmen to kill their wives and then the hitmen double-crossing them and killing them. What started out as, oh my gosh, maybe it was a carjacking, a robbery, how sad, how terrible, what a loss to the community, became kind of a really tawdry story about the dark side of Orange County.